What's up, co-reporters, and welcome back to my channel. I am joined with Dmitry Shaknovich of D-Shack Law here on YouTube to talk about O.J. Simpson's passing away and what that means for the Goldman family in regards to collecting the $100 million that he owed them before he passed away. So, Dmitry, before we even get into the money that OJ owed this family, can I ask you, what was your reaction to the OJ trial as a lawyer? Was that something that kind of inspired your career in law, something that really interested you while it was going on?
Well, that happened so far long before I came around. I was 7 years old when the OJ Simpson case happened. I was in this country for only 3 years. So I was a baby. But that case really just can't die, can it? It doesn't go away, and I don't know if it ever will, because it had so many of the ingredients that we as an American public love, right? It had violence, and it had race, and it had crime, and it had media, and it had all these other things, and the public just adores that stuff, and it won't ever go away. That kind of spectacle, it won't ever be replicated. And whether or not the trial did damage for the American public, it's possible. You have a perception of how the justice system works in a way that it doesn't really work. So that can't be a good thing. But overall, it's funny to see how it never goes away. I don't think it'll ever go away. And that's the way our media cycle is structured.
Exactly. There's just something about this case that is so gripping. I remember, because a lot of people have been trying to explain what it is. Some people say that this is the first time that a Black American got away with something, right? Got away with murder, so to speak. And so that was a huge upset for people. Some people say that it was also because of the time. There was Rodney King, the uprising for Rodney King happening at the same time. So people just felt like overwhelmed by all of the racial issues that were happening at the time. But it really is just such a wild, wild story. And now with the passing of O.J. Simpson, his lawyer, Malcolm LaVergne, is publicly pledging that no money from his estate will ever go toward paying for the wrongful death judgment that O.J. Simpson owes to Ron Goldman and Nicole Brown Simpson's families. So I want to ask you how that would even be possible for them to keep money away from these victims who were owed money from O.J. while he was alive.
Well, it's funny. Your estate, quote unquote, doesn't really change whether you're alive or dead. So if he, while living, had money, right, that is not exempt from collection, and there are certain ways that money can be exempt from collection, pensions, and other things. If that money was available to him during his life, then it'll be available during his death, right? You would have to commit fraud otherwise. You would have to move money around so that it looks like it's not disposable effectively. So it doesn't surprise me, because in death, he would have the same funds available to make those payments as he would in life. So perhaps his lawyer is referring to that.
Okay, so basically everything, the way it was structured is the way that it's going to remain. So it's not looking too good for these families, unfortunately.
Well, it's not looking too good for them to the extent that it wasn't looking too good for them in prior years. I don't think they can squeeze money from places where they couldn't squeeze it in the past. Now, it turns out that he's been hiding money and he's sitting on a fortune and nobody knows about it, and he's doing things to evade a judgment. Then obviously they'll pursue it that way. And if anybody's helping him who is now still alive, they'll be held accountable. But otherwise, it's really the same estate that you're dealing with.
So when it comes to his children, so for example, O.J. Simpson has some children, and if they were to inherit money, would these victims be able to kind of intercept that, see where that money is coming from, and get a portion of it themselves?
So it depends, right? There are several things you have to keep in mind. Number one, this is a judgment that came out of California. I know that after this judgment came down, I know he lived in Vegas for some time. I know he lived in Florida for some time. Nobody really knows much about him in terms of where he was situated permanently. And the laws of each state would matter. So it would matter where those things happened. And the estate planning laws, whether he had a will or died what they call intestate without a will, those would kick in depending on where he is, right? Different states have different state laws. So that's number one. Number two, because the judgment's in California, if there are assets elsewhere, they may have to domesticate them elsewhere, which maybe they already did, right? I don't know the degree with which they were actively pursuing this judgment over these last several years. Maybe once he got out of prison in Vegas, they domesticated these judgments. Maybe they did it even before then. So a lot is unknown. It depends, and it depends state to state. States are different as to how they deal with this kind of stuff. This field of law isn't federal.
Okay. And what does it mean to domesticate a judgment?
So if a judgment is issued in one state, it's not necessarily enforceable in another state. You may have to go to a court in that state, in the state in which you're trying to enforce, and domesticate it, right? Make that judgment carry the same weight as it did in the home state.
Okay. Thank you so much. So from what I'm understanding, O.J. Simpson was bringing in about $400,000 a year from NFL pensions, the Screen Actors Guild, and some other sources, but they were protected from the Goldman family and the Brown family's attempts to seize them before. So you did mention something about pensions a little bit earlier in this interview. Is that like a way to kind of shield money?
There are certain forms of monies that are exempt from judgment collection, right? Pension being one of them. And again, depending on where you are, other forms of money. Look, if you're making money, if you're earning an income and putting it into a bank account, then that money should technically be garnished and seized, right? That's how you comply with the judgment. But there are certain portions of the money that someone may have that is exempt from judgment collection in a case like this.
Okay. So there were a lot of questions circulating when the news broke that OJ had passed away. And a lot of people were wondering about the NDAs that he had his family and friends sign in order to visit him. Have you heard of things like this happening on people's deathbeds? And what do you think is behind the NDA? Perhaps a deathbed confession or anything like that?
Well, that's pure speculation. I mean, look, NDAs, you can sign an NDA for really anything. It may just be because maybe he was afraid that somebody was going to say anything that would happen in that environment, and he didn't want that to take place. NDAs are designed to keep somebody's mouth shut, not necessarily to keep them from saying something, right? So, once a person enters his home, wherever this happened, right, in the final days and weeks of his life, that person now has access. And so anything that person says is given some sort of credibility, and perhaps he wants to remove any possibility that person will go to the media or something of that sort.
Okay, I could totally see that. So I did see a copy of the NDA that leaked from P. Diddy's camp. So basically he said the NDA was valable. It was, what is this word? When something, what is that word? It's worth his life plus 25 years. What's that word? So I can go back and fix that.
His life plus 25 years?
Yes, on his NDA for P. Diddy. So with O.J. Simpson's NDA and with him being on his deathbed and him now being passed away, what is kind of like the length potential of this NDA and the validity? That's the word, the validity of it.
Well, it depends on the terms, right? An NDA is a contract. You can contract to anything virtually as long as it's not illegal and other things. You can contract to a whole lot, right? So it depends on what the contract is for. And contracts have to be supported by something called consideration. So there are a whole bunch of legal questions as to this. I don't know if anybody will go to court to litigate this thing. But NDAs are contracts, right? So anything is really that is included in there is subject to contract interpretation and enforcement and things that the courts deal with every day.
Okay. Perfect. And so there's no limits. It's not like copyright law, right? Because I think typically when it comes to the copyright of somebody's work, it's the life of the artist plus X amount. But with an NDA, you can even say for eternity.
Well, it's possible. And again, if it's past the person's life, then at that point, who would be the party suing? It would have to be the estate. Whether or not the NDA expressly accounts for that is a whole different story. There are a bunch of legal questions that would have to be worked out for something like this.
Okay, I understand. So, OJ's lawyer was really, really brutal in the statement that he released on the record in regards to the Goldman family and the Brown family's potential for recouping some of this money that was owed to them by OJ Simpson. He is on the record saying, and I quote, "It's my hope that the Goldmans get zero, nothing, them specifically, and I will do everything in my capacity as the executor or personal representative to try and ensure that they get nothing." And as of right now, they're not aware of the value of the estate either. So I gotta ask you, where do you think this venom is coming from? Because you would think that the Goldman family did something to OJ and not the other way around.
Well, maybe it's not venom. Look, lawyers have to fulfill the wishes of their clients, right? And that responsibility survives death. And so maybe OJ told his lawyer, "This is what I want, and this is how I want you to go about doing it." And so as a lawyer, he's ethically obligated to convey his client's desires and push his client's wishes. And that's maybe what he's doing. So, there's a fine line about how you advocate for a client and how zealous that has to be. It's possible he's just doing what his client wanted him to do.
Okay. It just feels so harsh.
It's horrible. It's absolutely horrible. And it's bad. And it's terrible in ways that nobody can even understand. But that particular point may be as a result of an ethical duty.
Exactly. And you know what? The only way so far for anybody watching that the Goldman family has been able to get any sort of money back from OJ, is from the sales of his book. Do you remember the details of that arrangement and why it was that they were able to pretty much dictate the way that the book was entitled and able to get the royalties of the book and everything like that?
My recollection is that he released the book and they didn't really know about it or didn't know about it in time to do anything about it. And once they found out, they, through litigation, secured the rights to the book. And then, obviously, once they had that, they could rename it and do other things to it. So I think that's what happened.
So yeah, you guys, so far that's the only way. And I believe it's reported that they only made about $250,000 from that book. But remember, OJ owes about $100 million. So there's a long way to go from there. And now there's someone from OJ's circle named Bruce Fromong who spoke out on the record. And he basically said that he helped OJ set up offshore accounts. So now with that direct statement on the record, is there anything that the Goldman family or the Brown family can do in order to try to get some of this money?
So if it's found that somebody is evading the judgment illegally, meaning moving money so that the Goldman family can't find it, then you would have to go into court, bring that person into court, and try to hold him liable, right? Try to have him testify that this is happening, try to have him give him details. And if judgments are court orders, right? If they're violated, then people can be held in contempt. And there are several forms of contempt, and one form of contempt may result in jail time. So it depends. I mean, you can't evade a judgment and move money just to not pay people. That's not how it works. And if they did it in such an intentional, meticulous way where they set up accounts in places where you can't access them, that's a really big deal. And I'm assuming if there's any credibility to that, that'll be pursued.
Okay. I can only imagine, right? Because it really feels like the Goldman family is motivated, especially now that OJ has passed away. This probably feels like an opening for them to go back once and for all. They did try to sue his kids or something like that in the past, and that didn't work out because I don't believe it's the kids that owed them anything at the end of the day. So it's going to be interesting to see how all of this ends up playing out. You guys, I was joined here by Dmitry Shaknovich of the YouTube channel D-Shack Law. He is a New York-based attorney who also covers a variety of topics on YouTube, including politics and pop culture. Make sure to subscribe to his YouTube channel for consistent videos featuring legal takes on today's hottest news. I've got his name on the screen, and he's also tagged in the description box of this video. Thanks so much for joining me as always, Dmitry, and I hope you have a great week.
Thank you.
No problem. Thank you. Take care.